If you don't already know, you could use color filters in your black and white photography to alter the look of your shots. Or your color photography too, I guess, but you shouldn't unless you want your photos to look like they were taken by HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Which, hey, you do you. I'm not here to judge. But when shooting black and white, using a color filter can help you achieve some interesting results. Today, we're going to be focusing on the red filter. For this, I use the Tiffin Red 25 filter, my new Bronica SQAI, and a roll of Arista EDU Ultra 100. Quick little story before we get going. I was planning on using Ilford HP5 for this whole test here, but I had a little mishap when loading the film. Here, let's watch the playback and see my reaction at the moment I realized that something went terribly wrong. What just happened? What happened was that the frame counter on the film back never reset to the S position when I was loading the film, and I didn't realize it until I had already connected it to the camera and started winding. So when I started winding the advanced winder, I ended up just winding the entire roll into the take-up spool, and then I lost it. I was straight up not having a good time. But luckily I wasn't too far from B&H, so I headed over there and picked up the cheapest roll of black and white I could find, which was Arista EDU Ultra 100. Now, I've shot Arista 100 in 35mm, but I've never shot it in 120, so I was actually really excited to see the results. But before I show you those results, what can we expect from a red filter? Well, first of all, we need to understand that Arista 100 is a panchromatic film. So it registers every color of the visible light spectrum and then converts them to black and white in various tones. To use black and white filters, you also should understand complementary colors. Simply put, a color filter will let its own color pass through with ease and will block its complement. The colors that they let pass through will render as brighter in the image or just as a lighter shade of gray. For instance, a very common example is if you're shooting a red rose with green leaves against a black background and you use a 25A red filter. It will let red light through, making the rose light gray to white, and block green light, a complementary color, making the leaves darker. Blues, greens, and purples are the ones that will have a harder time passing through the red filter and appear as darker shades of gray in your images. So for this test, I took 2 photos of each composition, one with the red filter and one without. Each photo was taken with a tripod to ensure that the composition stayed the same, and they were also taken merely seconds apart to ensure that the lighting didn't change dramatically. If you thought about turning this video off right then and there, then you will have missed one of the most important tips about shooting with a red filter. Something to consider when using a red filter is that it cuts out a significant amount of light. According to online consensus, approximately 3 stops of light. So after taking a meter reading of your scene and putting on the red filter, you'll want to adjust your settings 3 stops, either by opening up your aperture or slowing down your shutter speed. Also, just to note, according to some folks online, if you're using this filter on a camera with a through-the-lens metering system, like most 35mm SLRs, the camera should be accurately adjusting for the filter, so there's no need to add stops after taking the reading. As always with that kind of stuff, it may be in your best interest to go out and shoot a test roll with the filter on before actually just going out and trusting that the TTL meter is going to be adjusting for the filter. For this test, I kept a log of my camera settings so we could see all of this in action. Also, these images that you're going to be seeing are unedited by me. They are straight from the lab, so you'll get to see what these look like right out of the gate without any meddling. Here we have the clear photo on the left with no filtration, and on the right, we have the red filter. This was the first photo on the roll. Excuse the change in composition. I must have shifted the camera a bit when adjusting. Right off the bat, we can see clear as day the difference in contrast. Those blacks get darker and the highlights even get a little boost. Also, for this test going forward, I needed to make sure that I was shooting the clear one without filtration with enough leeway for me to open 3 stops when I ultimately added the filter. For this one, for whatever reason, I only opened 2 stops. I'm not sure why, but that also might be contributing to the darker shadows that we're seeing in this red filtered image. For the rest of them, I do believe that I added 3 stops of light. Here's shot number 2, again, clear on the left and red filter on the right. Now, when doing research on the red filter, I found that filtering red can also be used to separate clouds from the sky. On a bright day, a blue sky can show in your photo as near black, while clouds stand out in punchy shades of dark gray. Now, maybe it was because it was colder than a day-old dumpling outside, but I didn't take any footage when I was at this scene taking this photo. I seem to remember the sky being blue, which leads me to wonder why I didn't get those results that I just mentioned. But regardless, we see a change in contrast with those buildings popping out way more than in the clear version. One thing I'm also unclear of is why the buildings in the foreground appear to have significantly more shadow detail than the clear image. As far as I remember, there wasn't a dramatic change in lighting, and that whole building was shrouded in shadow, so I'm not sure. It's one of life's great mysteries. I do prefer the filtered version of this though. Popping those buildings away from the sky definitely adds some much needed dimension to the image. In this image, we see the most change in the ground. We could see in the footage that it was a semi-dark gray, and the red filter just accentuated the darkness of it. Like the last photo, I do prefer the red filtered version. After I finished this roll and this test, I had a moment where I was like, wait, did I just forget to take a photo of anything red? It would be pretty stupid of me not to include that in a video about the red filter. Luckily, my instincts are better than my memory, and I took a photo of this red tree sculpture on the High Line in Manhattan. And here is where we see, in my opinion, the most interesting and apparent difference. We see that filter in action on the right with a tree appearing pretty much white. To reiterate why that is, a colored filter will let its own color pass through with ease, and complementary colors will have a harder time doing so. And the colors that do pass through, in this case red, will appear brighter within the image or as a lighter shade of gray. So that's why the red tree appears white against the dark brown brick building behind it. In the clear version, the image seems flatter, and the tree almost blends into the background. Up next is a photo that I thought was going to be cooler than it actually turned out. It's just some wood beams sticking out of the water. I also messed up the focus in the red filtered version. We see pretty much the same results here though, some nice increase in contrast and some better texture coming out of the water. And last but not least, we have this. Because I wanted to keep the aperture the same to keep the same depth of field, I adjusted the shutter speed. I actually did this a couple of times in previous photos and just forgot to mention it. And because of that, like I mentioned earlier, I had to have most of these shot while using a tripod. If your clear exposure reading has you shooting an f4 at 1/60th of a second and your lens only opens to a 2.8, you wouldn't be able to get the 3 stops necessary for the red filter by opening the aperture. So then you're left with slowing down your shutter speed, which in most cases I actually think is a better option given that the red filter is actually a great companion for landscape photography. And in landscape photography, having a smaller iris like an f16 or 22 would help you get as much of your landscape in focus as possible. But something that I did discover on this test is that the Bronica SQ-AI can have some pretty heavy camera shake. Some of these photos look a little wonky because of the longer exposure times and the mirror slap causing the camera to shake a little bit even on the tripod. But for purposes of this video, we're mainly concerned with what the red filter is actually doing to the image anyway. What we saw across the board was increased contrast, some darker shadows, and we saw what it will do to any reds within your image. Something else to note that wasn't really applicable to this test is that red filters are known to cut through fog, mist, and thin cloud layers. The red filter is claimed to eliminate almost all forms of atmospheric haze from a photo to help clear up distant landscapes. Also, while I don't have any portraits here in my examples, textures such as brick tiles in architecture or the fine details of human skin will look much grittier and more detailed through a red filter, giving a nice weathered look to your image. And voila, that about covers it. I haven't been shooting a whole lot of black and white lately, but when I do, I actually really like the elements that the red filter adds to your image. That being said, some scenes definitely don't call for it. Like, as cool as I think the red tree image is for this test, I wouldn't say that I go out looking for that kind of result in images that I take in my free time. So last piece of advice, it's important to take in the image that you're trying to capture before you apply the red filter. Try to understand and visualize what it's going to do to the final result. And then it's all about making a creative decision about whether or not to add the red filter to your camera. I hope this video was helpful for you all. Pretty soon I'm going to be making videos about the other colored filters like green, yellow, orange, so stay tuned for all of those. As always, you can help me out by hitting that subscribe button and hitting the bell to be notified when new videos are released. You can also hit that like button and feel free to share this video with other people within the film photography community. And don't forget to comment down below with any other tips about using the red filter that I forgot to mention in this video. You could also support this channel by becoming a member. You could head over to my website, or you could head over to my print shop and consider buying a print from darkroom.com. And that'll do it for this week. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time.